Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished professional from the world of venture capital who also has several other interests from Bangalore, India, Priya Mohan. Priya, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Ashutosh. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Priya is a partner at General Catalyst India. She's a venture capital firm that partners with founders from seed through growth stages. She's also a trained danseuse in Bharatnatyam, and she was recently admitted to the highly coveted Kamalnayan Bajaj Aspen Fellowship to its 10th cohort. Priya, you seem to have had an absolutely incredible journey. And before I ask you any questions on venture capital, tell me a little bit about your own journey.
Uh, my life's been a series of accidents, and I would say many of them positive accidents. I grew up in Chennai. I still call it Madras. I grew up in a semi-conservative Tamil Brahmin household. And I grew up in a neighborhood which had a lot of people who were of a similar, profile and also Brahmin. So I grew up with waking up at 4:35 as is, normal in my kind of places. And with my grandmother making coffee and the smell of coffee, and they used to be like, we were made to go out and pluck flowers and, go to the temple first thing in the morning. And it's fascinating when I look back, 43 years hence, about my own journey, where I am, my connection to spirituality, my child's connection to spirituality. It's indeed been a journey. Growing up in Madras, I would say, I joke about this, I had a very bipolar upbringing. My mom is a very, very grounded, middle class, a person who believes that the best way to run your life is to work in a bank, make X amount of money, be conservative, and be content and happy. Don't spend. In fact, she gets very upset when we buy a new car or something like that. And completely opposite was my dad, who's unfortunately no more, who is a dreamer, who's extremely ambitious, who is well-traveled, and who said that I wanted to conquer the world. And he loved finer things in life. So visualize a young lady in a sari with my dad in his fully done up pants and starched shirts and Mont Blanc and everything. So that's the household that I grew up in. And what it helped me establish is a balance between humility and ambition. So we went through a very, very tumultuous childhood, my brother and I. My dad lost everything, unfortunately. But I think at that point in time, my mom's upbringing really helped. Where she made us go in bus for 2 days a week, even when we had chauffeur-driven cars. I think that was a very, very useful lesson. And I believe that you're a product of your experiences. I think we've had some unique experiences. So that's a bit of my childhood and my background.
What an amazing story, and thank you for sharing it with us. So now let's talk about venture capital and General Catalyst. Tell me a little bit about the mission of General Catalyst, and you obviously are working to build companies, to use something from your own profile, that stand the test of time. So tell me a little bit about General Catalyst and how does it shape your approach to India?
If you know if you went through a little bit of our background, Neeraj, my partner, and I, we were running our own fund called Venture Highway, which merged with General Catalyst in June of this year. And the inspiration for the merger was twofold. One is Hemant, who is the CEO of General Catalyst, his vision for not just GC, but his vision for where the venture world is likely to go. And more importantly, the excitement as to how we can borrow that muscle memory and nuance for India. The mission is very simple. We call ourselves a global investment and transformation company. The reason we don't call ourselves a firm is because we truly believe that we want to go venture beyond. And what does it mean? Which is investments are core still. We will still do our seed investing and everything. But if you look at India, specifically in India, you have this whole set of amazing industries and companies which are going to be GDP moving for the country, which are going to be very relevant for the current age, which is got its new geopolitical nuances with specifically the India, US, and Europe corridor where General Catalyst is present. How do you step back and take a view of what are those industries, what are those drivers, and what is going to make India grow, right? Like all of us talk about moving our GDP per capita from $2,500 to 6,000 in the next 10 or 15 years. But clearly, these kind of industries are going to propel and have those network effects. And part of our mission is how do we help create, transform, facilitate such industries which often fall outside the boundaries of the traditional venture capital business. So one way to say is, find ideas, invest in them. The other way to think about it is, how do you create some of these new ideas and nurture them by giving them an unfair structural advantage and help create these massive industries? And this is not uncommon, right? If you look at our history, many of the conglomerates that we have, whether the Tatas or the Reliances, there is a very good thought on building this sustainably, and these companies have stood the test of time.
Yeah.
Now, if we invest intelligently, thoughtfully, and come together, bringing some structural advantages, then there's an opportunity to create many more of these. That's the mission of General Catalyst, and we've done that in the US with quite a few companies, especially in the health space, and our idea is to borrow that muscle memory and bring it to India.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And since you just spoke about the US and GC's experience there, how does the Indian startup ecosystem differ from so many other places GC is present in? And what makes it unique?
It's everything that's so unique about India, right? Actually, let's start with just the founders, right? Somebody asked me the other day, how's an Indian founder different? And when I heard your background, like with all your achievements, you would know this word called jugaad, right? Like which we so often use. We are 1.4 billion people. Just trickle that down to say 16,000 people who are passing out of IITs. And if you do that math, just look at the competitive nature of our country and the way people drive themselves to achieve something, right? And I also think that, compared to the 2000s, where, literally almost every top IITian or really smart people, there was a significant brain drain. The biggest difference today is people want to come back to India because they see the potential, right? So what's interesting about India is the raw horsepower and the raw talent, and more importantly, the kind of perseverance that is evolutionarily present in Indians. It's a unique trait.
Yeah.
What will be interesting is when we match that raw horsepower with this network effects that places like Silicon Valley has, or the exposure that it has, and brings it here, like loosely to use some Western thinking and Western scale to Indian raw horsepower. I think it's magic that can be created. And the second thing unique about India is from the customer side. So I've spoken about the founder side, and I'm sure this is spoken so much about so many people. It's the culture and the profile of customers across different spectrums are so nuanced and so different, right? And it's so vast that, the homogeneous pockets in itself are deeper compared, and equivalent to some large countries themselves, right? Like just take the Indian middle class, if you take the Indian upper middle class. But the way products and solutions have to be fine-tuned to this culture, like think about it, right? Even today, WhatsApp is not so prevalent in the US, but India was its largest market, followed by a few other places, right? Look at the takeoff of UPI in India. Let's talk about Zepto. It's taken off in India, and quick commerce has not been very successful in the rest of the world, right? So why? Because in India, take the Indian housewife, right? The number of times you make fresh food compared to most other places. We cook 2 times fresh meals, and every time, and an Indian homemaker is involved in food preparation, and suddenly she realizes, hey, I miss dal. I missed to buy this coriander leaves or something. The culture and the profile of our Indian customers are so unique. And I can go on and on, but I think...
No, but very well said. And thank you. That was a great response. Moving on, Priya, you work with so many startup founders, and it has often been said that a lot of startup founders don't make it, or a lot of startups don't make it. What are some of the unique challenges you have seen for early stage investing in our country?
I've been a founder myself, Ashutosh. So
Hmm.
before I became a venture capitalist, it was
Okay.
very accidental that I became a venture capitalist.
Hmm.
So I ran and built an edtech startup, which I sold. Actually, we were Baiju's first acquisition, one of their first acquisitions before
Hmm.
I became a VC. So I deeply empathize and understand what it takes to build a business in India.
Yeah.
And the unique challenge is so many actually. To start with, is the first time founders, and today they are far more aware. I would say, if I'll give you an example. One of the companies we backed is FamPay. We backed them when the two founders were still literally in their dorm rooms, right? Like
Hmm.
the awareness and the network effects and the support system of some of these groups of people are so strong today than it was back in the day when I was building, where there were still islands, right, where you didn't know much, right? I think the first thing is, a lot of times what seems like a great problem statement
Hmm.
may remain a great problem statement, but for it to become a viable business,
Hmm.
it's hard to smell it out at first, right?
Right.
So, and that you have to go through a process of either vicarious learning, where you have your networks and your surrounding founder friends who can help you, or you have to go through it yourself, right? So that's something I've learned as a founder. Like, there are many, many great important problem statements to solve for, but is
Hmm.
that actually going to become a viable business venture?
Hmm.
So having that is very important. And also the second, given the customer profiles are so nuanced and
Hmm.
segmented, our idea of what is an ICP, initial customer profile, is
Hmm.
so important, right? And there again, there are different approaches, right?
Hmm.
People say one approach is to go very narrow, but be so indispensable to them that
Hmm.
they can't live without using your product. And then
Right.
you expand.
Hmm.
Or you build a horizontal product, which is the product itself will get its pull. Case in point, WhatsApp.
Hmm.
But I felt that plays like WhatsApp are so rare. And sometimes I also wonder that many of this are collection of so many things coming together. It's very easy to unpack them in a hindsight 2020.
Hmm.
But are we able to go with a model that this will work? Very hard. So the third part I want to say is the randomness, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, the interaction between your product, your customer, and this whole entropy around it,
Hmm.
right? And as a founder, the biggest thing I feel we have to equip ourselves is to appreciate randomness, both in success, because luck plays a big role, and I'm extremely cognizant and aware of it.
Hmm.
And it also plays a role in failure,
Very
right?
nice.
So you just have to keep improving your quality of decision making and learning.
Hmm. Fascinating. You also have a strong focus on co-creation, Priya.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about this, and what does this mean in the context of your investments in India?
So going back to the point I made, with GC, one of the things that really drives us is uh, being able to create some of these large outcomes and
Hmm.
co-creating them from scratch.
Hmm.
And part of that thing is identifying phenomenal founders, giving them a reasonably good capital that gives them a heads up,
Hmm.
and also bringing that network, right? So some of the areas that are very, very close to our heart and our focus, because we have this India, US, Europe, kind of view, is defense, industrials, health, because we've seen a lot of work and done a lot of work in health,
Yeah.
financial services, and sorry, I'm missing the last one, and I'll come back.
Hmm.
Defense, industrials, financial services, health, and energy.
Hmm.
Sorry.
Hmm.
And these are very, very important areas for
Yeah.
us. One example outside this,
Hmm.
which is our first co-creation opportunity, which I led, is called Primus. This is in the senior living space.
Hmm.
Right. So we've done a lot of work in the senior living space. It was something that was very personal to me. I think that's something that all of us relate to
Correct.
with our parents, right? What is that solution that is relevant for our parents? It's
Hmm.
a fascinating age group. It's a
Hmm.
fascinating customer profile, which has been the underdog for a long time. And
Yeah.
now in the next 10 years, you're going to see a very large growth
Hmm.
of this aging active population. Of course, you have two types,
True.
active and non-active. The non-active is being solved by the hospices and others.
Yeah.
The active, what is the solution you're going to give them? And they are very unique because they are in a world where their interaction with technology is still stuck in the 1980s or 1970s. It's a fast-moving world. Their kids, many of them come from nuclear families. They want to interact with the kids. There's a little bit of loneliness. There is a need for purpose, but there's a craving for agency. I have a 72-year-old mother who I can't buy and just thrust something and say, use it. She needs agency. And after doing a lot of work, we realized the only way to do it is a full stack approach, starting with building communities. So we invested in this company called Primus. So that's one example of co-creation,
Very
where
interesting.
we actually work from scratch with a founder, create structures and put things together. We have a few more in the pipeline.
Fascinating. You also talk about the importance of social impact when you are looking at at your investments. How important is it for you to ensure your startups or your investees prioritize social impact?
That's a great question you asked. I want to start by, demystifying some of these words, right? When, at least in the venture world, the minute people say social impact, it's almost like an impact fund is separate from, a core capitalistic fund, right?
Absolutely.
I think the world is going to move towards something which is going to be a confluence of the two. You can't grow. I read this fascinating, actually in Aspen, we constantly debate between this trade-off between liberty and equality. And there's always going to be a tension between pure capitalism and impact. The way in GC, the word we use is responsible innovation. We believe that innovation is going to take the world forward. But in the process, we also want to be very thoughtful about what is the impact of that innovation. How do we create responsible innovation, which includes, impact on stakeholders, impact on the environment, impact on everything as we propel forward, right? And that, I think, is the only way to go forward, right? So in every one of our investments, we actually think very deeply about what is this responsible innovation, including the most debated topic of AI, right? What is the impact of AI? What is this going to imply? What are the pros? What are the cons? How do we think about it? And I think that's the first step, to actually have a dialogue and think through it. So I actually feel this demarcation of impact and investment is going to go away. And there's no other way for responsible people like us to actually merge the two and think deeply about what we're doing.
Very interesting. So one more question relating that I'm going to ask you on venture capital, then I want to move to another segment. When I was reading about you and preparing for my conversation, I was also struck by the importance of diversity that you talk about. So I want to ask you, can you explain the importance of diversity within the startup ecosystem, both in terms of founders and the products of services they create?
I think the mantra when it comes to diversity for me is, and I've said this in a few forums, actually, it's a tricky topic because it's complicated. Diversity for me is democratizing the opportunity.
Correct.
But not lowering the bar. And I'll say it again, it's democratizing the opportunity, not lowering the bar.
Very well said.
So, I mean, I'm very proud to say that we have a great ratio in our investment team between men and women, but it gets trivialized when I purely discuss it from a diversity perspective. Every one of the people who are there are because of their merit. But the extra effort that you need to do is when you're probably recruiting, you make sure that the inputs are at least equal. Very often, at least in my business, it's almost 80-20 or 70-30 between the quality of resumes that come between the two. So make sure taking that extra effort to democratizing the opportunity at the top. Similarly, when you're meeting startups, I don't think, any professional is expected to lower the bar, right? Like, so you're not going to invest in something that you believe that it's not meeting the bar. But
Correct.
Where the effort or democratizing the opportunity comes is when you make sure that you meet all kinds of opportunities, all kinds of founders, right? And today the topic of diversity, fortunately, has moved beyond just gender diversity.
Correct.
It's all kinds of diversity, right? Like, I personally am very interested in neurodiversity because I have a neurodiverse team, and we both talk a lot about, inclusivity across spectrum. And I think the world is moving towards that.
Well said.
So that's what I think we should do.
Great response.
Democratize the opportunity.
Absolutely. And you're so right. I mean, I've often said diversity is more a mindset that is important in an organization than just something that is there in a mission statement, if I can use the term. Um, I want to move to a few questions for you on your passion, which is Bharatnatyam,
Sure.
and you are a trained danseuse. Tell me what drew you to Bharatnatyam, and a lot of children are trained in this, but you've reached a different level of mastery. Tell me more about this.
Actually, I have to start by saying I've stopped. It's been almost 10 years since I'm dancing.
Okay.
Of course, I started learning when I was 7.
Hmm.
Truth be told, I actually was very interested in music, Carnatic music.
Uh-huh.
But my mom felt that, I had to be a dancer. So
Hmm.
she literally dragged me one day, cold called one of the best teachers, and I'm very proud to have learned under my guru, Dr. Sudharani Raghupati,
Hmm.
who's a very, very acclaimed dancer.
Hmm.
And she just like literally barged in, right? And nobody sells better than a mom, right?
Hmm.
All salespeople should learn
Absolutely.
from the mothers how they sell for their kids.
Hmm.
Incredible perseverance. Right? Like, so she
Yes.
just dragged me in. She was a nobody, and she said, Sudama, you have to just take her. So
Hmm.
that's how my journey started. First, reluctantly, because we were very obedient children back then, right? Like
Hmm.
you just had to show up. But I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, I used to train almost 2 to 3 hours, uh,
Hmm.
for 3 to 4 days a week. And then during performances, almost like 4 to 5 hours before and
Hmm.
after school. Um, the discipline it brings, I still carry it with me.
Hmm.
I think the one thing that I'm proud of, which my mom has actually instilled in me, is that discipline to just show up, no matter how bad or good a
Yeah.
day, you just show up. And I think training in anything, be it a sport or an art form, gives you
Hmm.
that discipline.
Hmm.
And the other thing about dance is the connect with the audience, right? Like, it's a beautiful symbiotic relationship. When you're up on stage, when you're expressing, when you're telling a story,
Hmm.
that ability to just catch an eye or catch an expression of, like in Chennai, we'll call the mamas and the mummies who are just nodding or doing a talam in their hand. It's
Hmm.
just fascinating, right? Like, so
Hmm.
that symbiotic relationship,
Yeah.
and that taught me all about energy, right?
Hmm.
Like today, we, especially in the business that we are in, it
Hmm.
is about relationships, Ashutosh.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
about people,
Hmm.
right? When we are talking here, it's the energy that you and I are creating,
Hmm.
and that laid the first foundation for me.
Correct.
And today I love, I mean, while I'm not dancing, I love seeing performances. I love listening to music, and it's almost a sort of meditation for me.
Amazing. Amazing. So time for one more question, and I'm now going to shift again. You were recently admitted into the Kamalnayan Bajaj Aspen Fellowship. Tell me more about this and what does it take to get admitted into something as prestigious as this?
uh, all the Aspen fellows have struggled to give an elevator's pitch about what is Aspen. And
Okay.
that's the most interesting thing about Aspen.
Hmm.
So many people who want to get nominated. Can you tell me what it is? I was like, I wish I can.
Hmm.
I think the easier question is how do you get in? Generally, you get nominated. So you
Mhm.
have an existing fellow. All of us get an opportunity to nominate one or two.
Hmm.
And then, then there's out of the funnel, you get like, you go through the process of selection and then you get interviewed and then, you get chosen.
Hmm.
I think the process of choosing itself is because, only when I got into my class, I saw how thoughtful the curation has been because
Hmm.
they really, really handpick people of different spectrums and different backgrounds
Hmm.
and stitch them together. It's almost like creating this intentional tension in philosophy and
Hmm.
experiences in life so that you
Hmm.
come together and you learn from each other. That's
Hmm.
fascinating.
Amazing.
That's the first part. What is Aspen? I say very philosophically, Aspen is for the soul. This is
Mhm.
not if this is not for people who are looking for some leadership or like frameworks for that. I think this is when I feel it's almost like you should get in only when you're ready. And
Hmm.
this readiness is when you're seeking, and you're seeking beyond just your current career or a job.
Hmm.
And so it's a bunch of us. We have set of readings, we have moderators, but the most important thing is your ability to collectively ruminate and discuss on very, very important aspects of human life, philosophy, your own philosophy. And what's amazing is as you're like, it's very cathartic when you speak and discuss because it reflects on your own practices, on your own philosophy of what makes a good society, what makes a good human being. And that's Aspen, right? Like it really is a transformation, group transformation that you go through. And the more you absorb, the more transformed you become. So
How amazing, how amazing. And on that note, Priya, I just want to say thank you so much for speaking to me about your own incredible journey. Thank you for speaking to me about General Catalyst. I think I just love the way how you were able to articulate the mission and about how easily you were talking about the support that you're giving to so many startup founders who really need a lot of support. And you've been a founder yourself, so you'd know how important it is to get the right kind of a fund to support with. We spoke about some interesting challenges about early stage investing. We also spoke about co-creation, which I thought was very unique in what you people are doing, rather than what I have often seen, which is how much can you grow and how soon can you grow. Thank you also for talking to me about diversity. I think we covered a lot of ground in that area, and I'm sure that's a subject we can keep talking about. Finally, thank you for speaking to me about Bharatnatyam and about the Aspen Fellowship. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
thank you so much, Ashutosh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.